Hello, and welcome to Interpreting Biblical Poetry for this week. This week we're talking in the workshop about reading between the lines. Especially important as we approach the book of Proverbs this week is to remember what we talked about earlier in the course, the golden rule of wisdom literature, which is timing is everything. This is an important principle as we seek to apply these passages to our lives, to the lives of those in ministry, to the lives of those we see around us. Timing is everything. If we keep this in mind, I think it's really going to help us as we move forward. So reading between the lines, we're trying to decide what happens at the small, microscopic level, especially in a book like Proverbs. How do we interpret that kind of poetry? Reading at this level, we'll use many of the tools that we've already learned throughout this course. We'll also be pulling from this book, How to Read Proverbs by Tremper Longman III, if you'd like that for a reference. How then should we see these Proverbs, these short statements? I think Bruce Waltke makes an important distinction in his commentary on Proverbs. He says this: the meaning of English proverbs differs somewhat from the Hebrew term as used in Proverbs, that is the book. In English, a proverb refers to a short, pithy saying that has popular currency. But the biblical proverb refers to an apothegm that has currency among those who fear the Lord. There's a difference here between popular currency and currency among those who fear the Lord. So as we move into this, what can we notice? I think we can notice some things about parallelism, like what James Kugel says. He says it's helpful to define parallelism like this: A, what's more, B. You could see this at play in a verse like Proverbs 17, verse 25. A foolish son is grief to his father, and bitterness to her who bore him. A, what's more, B. Keep that in mind as you move through the Proverbs. Also, using discourse analysis will help. It will help you think through the logical relationships between the clauses. One thing, though, that you must keep in mind as you do your discourse analysis is a word concerning Hebrew conjunctions. In Hebrew, there are very few conjunctions, not like there are in English. And oftentimes in the book of Proverbs, two clauses are just connected with one small little Hebrew conjunction, the or wa, which is often translated as and. However, in the book of Proverbs, this word is frequently translated as but or. It actually is a conjunction that can mean any number of things. And so just because you have a word in your English text, like but, or, and, furthermore, it doesn't necessarily mean that those words are represented in the Hebrew text themselves. So, what you need to do is try to think through the relationship between the two clauses and come up with your own decision as to what you think the real relationship is. Again, this is the goal of the whole process, just to analyze these relationships. Let's look at some examples of parallelism between versets. We may have come across a verse like this: he who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. What kind of relationship would you attach to that? Which one of our categories of logical relationships would you call this? This is probably an adversative. He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. How about this next one? Like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the sluggard to those who send him. This would be a good one for analyzing imagery, right? I'm not sure how many of us have ever swished vinegar in our mouths. And so what did it mean for them to have vinegar to the teeth? We can maybe understand smoke to the eyes. But then the second part, so is the sluggard to those who send him. What would you call this logical relationship? probably a comparison. How about this one? From the fruit of a man's mouth, his stomach is satisfied. He is satisfied by the yield of his lips. Here, I think we have an idea, and then we're given an explanation of that idea in the very next clause. Oftentimes, you'll see just this in Proverbs, verset after verset, clauses related just to the one immediately next to it. However, sometimes we'll see it between verses, stepping out at a little bit of a broader level. Let's take a look at this. When you sit down to eat with a ruler, observe carefully what is before you. What's the relationship there? Temporal. It's the time. But then look at the next verse. And put a knife to your throat if you are given to appetite. This, I think, is an if-then statement. If you are given to appetite, then put a knife to your throat. You see, though, we don't have, then, two verses that are isolated in context from each other. Rather, we have two ideas that are related. So then, we're going to bracket them together, and we're going to mark the logical relationship. I think this is a progression. Sit down to eat, and put a knife to your throat if you are given to appetite. Images and poetic devices is also something to keep in mind as you read Proverbs. Proverbs are just chock full of images. Images from everyday life, some of which we understand, others which we do not. It will be very important here to pay attention to the images. Pay attention to women. Pay attention to animals. Pay attention to pictures from life. How about this example? Like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without discretion. There's an element of surprise in that second line, right? The first is surprising enough. A gold ring in a pig's snout. That's a very vivid picture. And yet we find in the second line a beautiful woman without discretion. So a few things to remember here as we wrap up this discussion of reading between the lines. First, remember, a discourse analysis is only part of the process. For some of this, we may get to the end of a discourse analysis of a chapter of Proverbs and find that everything is just a series, and that's okay. But sometimes doing a discourse analysis will allow you to detect a more broad, overarching structure. At the end of the day, though, you are after what the text is really communicating, and that's what we're going to try to do as we read between the lines, as we try to really dig in and find out what's happening in these short proverbial type sayings. So let's practice. Visit BibleArc.com. I want you to do a discourse analysis on Proverbs 20, verses 1 through 12. As you do that, I want you to take notice. What features of the minutiae stand out? What do you notice about some of the small things in the text, be it imagery, be it structure? Then I want you to post your results along with your discourse analysis in the Interpreting Biblical Poetry forum.